August 1943, Sicily. The Allied invasion is succeeding. German forces are retreating, and the war in the Mediterranean appears to be moving in the Allies' favor. On paper, General George S. Patton is winning. His army is advancing, his reputation is soaring, and his aggressive leadership is being praised across the command structure. But the greatest threat to Patton's career is not coming from the enemy's artillery or armored divisions. It is coming from Patton himself. Inside a small U.S. Army field hospital tent, far from the noise of the front lines, a single moment is about to outweigh months of battlefield success. No maps will change, no territory will be lost, but one impulsive act will force the highest levels of Allied command to confront a question more dangerous than any German counterattack. Can a commander who wins battles be allowed to violate the very discipline that holds an army together? To understand what happened inside that hospital tent, you have to understand how George Patton saw war and command. Patton believed that fear was more dangerous than bullets, that hesitation killed faster than enemy fire, and that discipline was the thin line separating victory from collapse. He studied ancient commanders obsessively and admired their severity, convinced that soldiers did not rise to the occasion, but fell to the level of discipline enforced upon them. To Patton, visible weakness in combat was not a private struggle, it was a contagious threat that could spread through a unit and get other men killed. He did not see himself as cruel, and he certainly did not see himself as wrong. In his mind, every harsh word, every act of intimidation, and every demand for toughness served a single purpose: keeping the army aggressive, cohesive, and moving forward. Compassion, when it interfered with momentum, was something Patton believed an army could not afford in the middle of a war. The hospital tent was quiet, heavy with the smell of antiseptic and exhaustion, a place meant for recovery rather than judgment, when Patton stepped inside and began moving from bed to bed. He spoke briefly to wounded soldiers, offering praise to those with visible injuries, reinforcing his belief in sacrifice and toughness, until he stopped at a young infantryman suffering from what doctors recognized as battle fatigue. The soldier had no visible wounds, only shaking hands, confusion, and fear. And when Patton asked why he was there,
the answer triggered something immediate and explosive. Patton accused him of cowardice, raised his voice, and struck him, not once, but twice, in front of stunned medical staff and other wounded men who sat frozen in silence. In that moment, discipline collided with human limits, and a single act inside a canvas tent quietly crossed a line that no battlefield victory could erase. When news of the incident reached Omar Bradley, his reaction was not anger, but concern, because Bradley understood something Patton never fully accepted. Modern war broke men in ways courage alone could not prevent. Bradley was not a theatrical commander, and he did not believe leadership required fear or humiliation to function. He believed soldiers fought best when they trusted their commanders, not when they feared them. As reports from the hospital filtered upward, Bradley immediately recognized the danger, not just to the wounded soldier, but to the army itself. If Patton's behavior became public, it would undermine morale, erode trust, and hand the enemy a powerful narrative about Allied leadership. British commanders were informed, Washington was alerted, and suddenly Patton's battlefield victories were overshadowed by a single moment of violence against one of his own men. The issue was no longer whether Patton had crossed a line, but how far the shockwaves of that moment would travel once they reached the very top of the Allied command structure. When the report reached Dwight D. Eisenhower, it landed
not as a moral question, but as a command crisis, because Eisenhower understood that whatever decision he made would shape the character of the Allied army. Firing Patton would send a clear message about discipline and accountability, but it would also remove the most aggressive and effective battlefield commander at a critical moment in the war. Protecting Patton would preserve military momentum, but it would signal that results mattered more than conduct, a precedent Eisenhower knew he could not afford. Alone in his office, Eisenhower weighed battlefield necessity against institutional integrity, aware that both could not fully coexist in this moment. He knew Patton's brilliance was real and irreplaceable, but so was the danger of allowing a commander to operate without restraint. In that quiet space, Eisenhower confronted the central burden of leadership in wartime, choosing not between right and wrong, but between two risks that could both weaken the army if handled poorly. As Eisenhower wrestled with the consequences of Patton's actions, Omar Bradley emerged as the quiet, stabilizing force in the background, not arguing for Patton's innocence, but for restraint in judgment. Bradley understood that the army could not afford either chaos or the loss of a proven commander, and his counsel reflected that balance. He framed Patton not as a villain to be punished or a hero to be protected, but as a volatile asset that required control. Bradley reminded Eisenhower that Patton's value lay on the battlefield, not in front of cameras or public opinion, and that leadership sometimes meant absorbing criticism in order to preserve long-term effectiveness. Without theatrics or emotional appeals, Bradley helped Eisenhower see a third option emerging between dismissal and denial: contain Patton, limit his exposure, and ensure his aggression was directed only where it could serve the war effort rather than damage it. Eisenhower's decision was neither dramatic nor forgiving because it was designed to correct behavior without destroying capability. Patton would not be court-martialed, but he would be publicly disciplined in a way that stripped him of prestige and reminded the Army that no commander was above accountability. He was ordered to apologize to the wounded soldier and to the medical staff who witnessed the incident, and those apologies were delivered in front of units that once admired him without question. Patton was removed from frontline command
and sidelined during the planning of future operations, a quiet but deliberate demotion that carried more weight than formal charges. The punishment sent a message without ending a career, reinforcing discipline while preserving the option to use Patton again when the war demanded aggression over restraint. For George Patton, the punishment was more painful than any formal dismissal because it struck at the core of his identity as a warrior and commander. Forced to apologize to soldiers he believed he had failed by showing weakness, Patton complied outwardly while absorbing a humiliation he could neither forget nor fully accept. He was sidelined as major operations moved forward, watching from the margins while other generals received the opportunities he believed he had earned through aggression and victory. During this period, Patton wrote privately of anger, frustration, and a gnawing sense of betrayal, convinced that his instincts had been punished while lesser commanders advanced safely within the rules. Yet beneath the bitterness was a quiet reckoning, as Patton realized that his own temperament, not enemy action, had nearly ended the career he valued above everything else. In the quiet after the decision, Eisenhower allowed himself no satisfaction, because he knew he had not solved a problem so much as contained it. In private conversations and personal notes, he acknowledged the uncomfortable truth that Patton's flaws were inseparable from his effectiveness, and that eliminating one would likely destroy the other. Eisenhower did not trust Patton's judgment, but he trusted his ability to fight, and that distinction defined how Patton would be handled from that moment forward. The Army needed Patton's aggression, but only under supervision, only when the stakes justified the risk. Eisenhower understood that leadership at this level meant accepting imperfect tools and managing their damage rather than pretending perfection was possible. The decision haunted him, not because it was wrong, but because it revealed how fragile authority becomes when brilliance refuses to be contained by rules. The consequences of the slap incident did not end with Patton's punishment, because it permanently reshaped how he would be used for the rest of the war. He was excluded from the Normandy landings, deliberately sidelined to prevent risk while Allied forces established a foothold in Europe.
And even his presence was manipulated as part of deception operations rather than battlefield command. Yet when the war demanded speed, aggression, and relentless pressure, Patton was brought back, tightly controlled but fully unleashed when results mattered most. Every major success that followed, from the breakout in France to the rapid advance across Europe, carried the invisible imprint of Sicily. Because Eisenhower never forgot what Patton was capable of, for better and worse. The incident ensured that Patton would never again operate without oversight, but it also guaranteed that when impossible objectives needed to be achieved, Eisenhower would still reach for the same dangerous, indispensable commander. The burden of command. The slap incident in Sicily was never just about one soldier or one commander. It was about the impossible choices inherent in leadership at the highest level of war. Eisenhower's whispers, private reflections, and deliberate actions revealed the central truth of command. The people who can deliver miracles are often the most difficult to manage, and the very traits that make them effective also make them dangerous. Discipline, morality, and strategy collide in moments like these, forcing leaders to weigh human flaws against operational necessity. Patton's brilliance could not be tamed without diminishing its impact, nor could it be left unchecked without risking catastrophe. Eisenhower's solution was neither perfect nor comfortable. It was management of contradictions, containment of volatility, and strategic patience. History remembers the victories, the rapid advances, and the audacious maneuvers, but the lessons lie in the quiet rooms, the whispered decisions, and the recognition that leadership is as much about controlling genius as it is about defeating the enemy.